What are the Nameless Things? Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Terry and this is Marvelous Videos. Gandalf states in the Lord of the Rings texts that there are monsters who are older and also fouler than the ruthless orcs living in Middle-earth. But to what is he referring? Who are these mysterious creatures? While Sauron was the big bad in all of the Lord of the Rings movies, the series was still full of beasts, nightmares and horrors. While dragons, werewolves and balrogs all made frequent appearances, there were many worse monsters in the movies. Gandalf recapped his battle with the horrific Balrog of Moria in the Two Towers by remarking, "Far, far beneath the deepest digging of the dwarfs, this planet is wrenched by nameless creatures. Even Sauron is unaware of them. They are all older than he is." Those nameless things remain one of the biggest mysteries of the Lord of the Rings, yet there are several theories regarding them. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Now, let's begin. What are the Nameless Things? When it comes to Tolkien's masterwork, The Lord of the Rings, there seem to be many various evils that afflict the world, just as there are many different things that make the universe good. As yet, we know for a certainty that the most heinous villain in Tolkien's writings and films is the wicked Dark Lord Sauron, who sought to engulf the globe in darkness by rejoining with the powerful One Ring. However, there are other terrifying monsters that have made appearances, like huge spiders and dragons, as well as the Balrog. The Nameless Things residing in Moria, which were referenced fleetingly in the movies and the novels, but were never properly investigated, have long piqued the interest of aficionados of both the novels and the movies. So, what exactly are Moria's Nameless Things? Some speculate that we may have encountered a nameless thing throughout the Lord of the Rings novels and movies. As a result, it's plausible that there are many more of these monsters hiding beneath the surface, indicating that the Watcher is only one of the rare examples of how awful these things may be. Despite this, no one knows exactly what the Nameless Things are or how they appear, with the exception of the remote chance that the Watcher is one of them, although we could just say that it was simply a mindless wild animal. The fact that Gandalf referred to them as Nameless Things indicates that he, a wizard who has lived for hundreds of years and has wandered his whole existence, knows nothing about these creatures and is absolutely terrified to learn more about them. In fact, Gandalf wasn't in Middle-earth for the whole period, but he certainly spent a minimum of 2,000 years traveling around after being brought there. Nonetheless, despite spending time with the Valar prior to traveling to Middle-earth, he knew nothing of these nameless things. It's likely that not even the Valar are aware of these beings. Who created the Nameless Things? Exploring the multiple theories. Gandalf asserted that these unnamed entities underneath Arda had existed for longer than Sauron, implying that they existed prior to the actual presence of Sam Maiar. These unnamed creatures were claimed to be slipperier than fish and chose to live in the dark. As long ago as the Elder Days, they were reported to have lived in caverns deep beneath the hearts of mountains. When the Misty Mountains orcs dug around Goblin Town, building new tunnels as well as extending and uniting the ones that were already there, their original occupants retreated to the darkest depths and hid beyond their sight. Durin's Bane had learned to traverse through the nameless monster's tunnels throughout its long amount of time in Moria, according to Gandalf. The Balrog escaped down these tunnels when their fall deposited them into a subterranean lake, and Gandalf chased it closely, knowing that its mastery of the caverns was possibly his last hope of escape. Their pursuit took them to the base of the Endless Stair, which they then climbed to reach the summit of Ziraxigil. Todd Jensen speculates that the nameless entities were inspired by the Norse mythological dragon Nidhogg, who chewed at the base of Yggdrasil, the World Tree. Many people believe that the Watcher in the water is possibly one of the terrifying Nameless Things, and this is a plausible explanation. Gandalf stated that the Watcher crept or was pushed out of black seas under the mountains after retreating into Moria. In the deepest parts of the globe, there are darker and fouler monsters than orcs. Gandalf appears to be referring to the very same nameless things which he mentioned afterwards. More proof may be found in the Lord of the Rings novels, where the Watcher was significantly more Lovecraftian and enigmatic than the squid octopus creature from the adaptation. Even if one had appeared, no one could determine with certainty who the Nameless Things actually were and what they looked like. The idea that Gandalf referred to them as nameless indicated that he had no idea what they were. This is crucial, as Gandalf spent the first and second ages in Valinor with the Valar, and if they couldn't even identify the creatures or tell Gandalf regarding them, the monsters were just really indescribable. However, there are a few hypotheses as to how the Nameless Things actually came to be. The first is that Morgoth fashioned them deep within Utumno's tunnels. Morgoth was continually looking for new methods to create, yet whatever he created was terrible and ruined. They were more ancient than Sauron merely because Sauron didn't assist Morgoth from the start and wasn't present when Morgoth made them. As a result, he wouldn't have been privy to all of Morgoth's secrets. Another piece of evidence is that the Valar didn't discover all of the caverns beneath Utumno throughout the War of Wrath, implying that some of Morgoth's inventions were forgotten beneath the planet. The second explanation takes Gandalf's assertion more literally, in the sense that perhaps the Nameless Things are older than Sauron. The Nameless Things need to have been made during the Ainulindale in order for them to be more ancient than the Maiar. During that time, Eru Ilúvatar formed the Valar, who harmonized their singing to aid in the creation of Arda. Morgoth, then named Melkor, however, introduced discord to the song, which had a disastrous impact. Christopher Tolkien addressed this especially in Morgoth's Ring, Part 7, Myths Transformed, Notes on Motives Inside the Silmarillion. Out of the discordance of the music, and directly from either of the theme sounds, Melkor's or Eru's, but from their dissonance with reference to one another, bad things emerge within the land of Arda, which didn't fall from any direct design or vision of the Dark Lord Melkor. As a result, malevolent entities like Ungoliant sprang from discord and came into either the Void or Arda. A third hypothesis, based on a Mandos prophecy, predicts that Morgoth will perhaps one day go back to Middle-earth to begin the Dagor-Dagorath, also known as the Last War. On that day, he will reveal the Nameless Things to be his powerful secret weapon, hoping to conquer Middle-earth and kill the Celestial Valar once and for all. Were they created by Melkor? The Nameless Things actually are Melkor's inventions, and they are his hidden weapons awaiting the coming of the Dagor-Dagorath. Remember, he journeyed into the distant reaches of the emptiness in pursuit of the imperishable flame, but he never actually found it. But throughout all of that effort spent analyzing, plotting and preparing, he was bound to have discovered something, some method for creating things. We all know that Tolkien's works are filled with Catholic themes and that his work only progresses in line with Eru's will. But what if that isn't the case? We just have Eru's word for it. Manwë wasn't going to think by himself long enough to figure out what was going on, and there were plenty of hints that demonstrate how ineffective he'd been as a king. Melkor's might had dwindled to the point that an elf named Fingolfin could fight him and gravely hurt him. The same creature who, for a long time, took on all of the deities by himself. Even Sauron displayed a powerful brain and strategic abilities. So where did Melkor's tremendous power go? Remember that the Silmarillion was written from the perspective of the elven people who acquire their information from the Valar, and since they couldn't fathom Melkor's wickedness and depravity, they allowed him to go pretty easily the first time. They only know what Eru thinks. Melkor, in our belief, was a far more intelligent being than the beast he misled the Valar to believe he was. This is due to the fact that his strength is claimed to have been invested in Arda itself, as well as his army. We're sure that he could actually understand how it would turn out if he squandered it all on monsters and dragons. His end goal was to trick Eru and the Valar into believing he was no more than a boorish, conceited fool who would only ruin things, losing his power and progressively destroying himself. But if he spent all of his world-shaping, continent-leveling abilities on these troops, why didn't they stand a chance against the powerful elves? Elves used the orcs as pawns, slaughtering them in large numbers. The dragons also were slaughtered in large numbers. So how did he use all of his powers and spare time? He was plotting and putting his strength on things that might be useful for the last fight that he'd eventually have. Some of these were the Nameless Things that no one knew about. Melkor definitely had secrets that even Sauron wasn't aware of, because he didn't join him until after he had been serving Aule for a while. These secret nameless creatures had been nestled away in the Earth's depths with nothing to do except nibble away at the planet, hibernating and maybe growing in power over time. He'd spent a significant part of his precious time corrupting Arda's matter that it only made sense to build entities that could benefit from that immense and enormous power, in addition to the power invested by the Valar in creating Arda. He didn't manage to win the wars due to the fact that he held back and invested his strength wisely rather than wasting it in useless battles. Mandos's forecast about the Dagor-Dagorath is just that, a prediction of Mandos, whose wisdom and talents are bestowed to him by Eru. This implies he might be mistaken about his prognosis, because the struggle is between Eru and Melkor, and what whatever secrets or covert attacks Melkor wants to throw into this battle are unknown to him. So, with Melkor unexpectedly whiling away his time in the Abyss, we believe he's merely waiting for the ideal moment to attack, once he has taken the power invested in the universe by the Valar and himself through the nameless creatures. Only then will he employ any additional secret weapons he hasn't used yet, enter the Door of Darkness, and battle the Valar for the first and final time. And it's not going to be close. The nameless creatures are kept a secret by purpose. We can only guess and hypothesize about them. Perhaps they vary from other wicked beings in that they are from a more distant past, yet are nonetheless prone to, or come from, Melkor's evil. How might such beings be more ancient than Sauron, an Ainu who predates the universe? First off, it's doubtful Gandalf is referring to a conventional or geographical date, such as when Sauron was defeated, or when he arrived in Middle-earth. He's probably alluding to the essence of both entities. Because these things are older than Sauron, the mysterious nameless things are not at all known to him. As we study the Ainulindale, we learn that the powerful Valar came into Ea at the dawn of time, and then designated the universe for eons until the Maiar assisted the Valar long after they created Arda in the Abyss of Time. The term older or younger refers to individuals who arrived earlier in the time period. While it's popular to believe that the Ainur descended into a formless and gloomy Ea, this may not be the case. We don't know if Eru developed native spirits who were in Ea, or if echoes, byproducts and bad creatures from Melkor's discord entered the universe well before the Great Valar, but we do know that something arose in the void before Eru established Ea. Melkor produced terrible creatures inadvertently and indirectly through his discords, and such wicked entities arose throughout Arda. They are also not descended from any one of Eru's designs. Another fascinating element is that they despise Melkor, most likely because they perceive him as their subconscious creator. Melkor is to these creatures what Yavanna is to all the Ents and what Manwë is to the Eagles. They didn't invent these spirits, but the spirits appeared in music via the Valar's thoughts and were brought to life by Eru. They're not natives of Arda, most likely arriving from a faraway part of Ea or the Void itself. Although this is definitely Lovecraftian, it's not exactly what the author Tolkien had in mind. The nameless beings are equally scary, if not more so than the Balrog. Gandalf discusses the battle with Durin's Bane, but is unwilling to discuss the caverns of old monsters where he travelled to in despair. He doesn't just talk about such things to dim the brightness of day. The nameless monsters could have been similar to Ungoliant, huge and ugly enough to make Morgoth fear them. As a final point, it's notable that Durin's Bane undoubtedly had some link to them, and therefore connections with Morgoth are also likely. It's said in the text that he knew them all too well, but whether he was a herald, ally, or slave of the nameless creatures is unknown. A creature from the Nameless Things was seen in the Rings of Power. As per Amazon Prime's unique X-ray feature, there continue to be nameless things in the world's lowest locations, such as in the Sundering Seas. In the second episode of the show, a ferocious nameless thing known only as the Worm wrecked the ship from the southernmost lands of Middle-earth, abandoning the survivors and leaving them stranded at sea. After 2 weeks of hanging on, Aemon, Halbrand, Abigail, and 2 other survivors picked up a lost elf, Galadriel. At that point, one of the survivors notices a ship coming. However, they soon discover it's the debris of their very own ship being pulled along by the monstrous worm. With the exception of Galadriel and Halbrand, everyone is killed by the worm or stranded at sea in the subsequent onslaught. Conclusion. Despite Tolkien's proclivity for narrating the war between both evil and good, he may have unwittingly invented another battle, the battle of light and dark. This is not the same thing as good versus evil. People often associate light with goodness and dark with evil, as this is the perspective we often get from stories, watching children's programs, or reading graphic novels. It's a deeply religious story, which is expected given Tolkien's strong Catholicism, but it's also predictable. However, this conflict between dark and light represents a war between death and life. Nothing can develop in the absence of light. There's no blossom, there's no life, nothing. This is exactly what the nameless beings represent, the consumption of all existence without regard for good or evil, and they are, perhaps, a far more powerful opponent than Morgoth. We think the nameless beings are waiting for us, confined behind their own terrible maze, a prison rivaled only by the timeless void, where Morgoth awaits his tragic return to Earth, bound in Anganor's chains, and chained by his own terrible iron crown. Perhaps perhaps when the dreadful day of the end, the Dag or Daggerath, arrives, these beasts will finally raise their heads and make their way to the surface, hell-bent on extinguishing all light inside Ea. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.